Good morning, good morning, good morning. Edwina Murphy-Droomer here, and today we are on day 2 of the Reconnection Revolution. This series is all about reconnecting to the natural world and spirit. And today I thought I'd do something a little different, quite different. I'm actually going to take you on a little tour of my garden. So my children were all born in the country. We had a beautiful farm in Bendigo, and just out of Bendigo in a place called Ravenswood. And when their father and I separated, we sold that farm and I bought a flower farm inland. Sort of, it runs, for those that know the area at all, it was on a beautiful spot just on the outskirts of the Otways, at a place called Wurtabullock, and it was a flower farm and it was absolutely divine. It was the most magical place to raise my children, and we had a vast orchard and veggie gardens, and not to mention acres and acres of flowers, leucadendrons and proteas. So when we sold that when my children were getting into their teenage years and they really wanted to be in town. They wanted to get after school jobs and, spend more time with friends. And I was spending too much time in the car trying to make that all happen. So we sold the farm and moved into Torquay. And when we arrived here, the garden was absolutely blank. The only thing that we had was the beginnings of a hedge that bordered the property. It's about 600 square meters, I think. So not a huge block by any means. But I was determined that everything that we planted was going to be edible. So plants, food plants, a foodie garden, to make the use of the small space that we have. So we decided to, in order to make the most of the space that we had, we just decided to espalier fruit trees. And I think we've got like 14 fruit trees. So what I'll do is I'll turn the camera around. And, the reason that I want to do this, we've got Kylie Pinwill, amazing naturopath, foodie, hormone hub founder, joining us at 10 o'clock to talk about food and using nutritional medicine to support our health, and not just to heal, but to thrive. And so part of the way that I like to support people to reconnect to the natural world is through what I spoke about yesterday, which is reverence, awe, and wonder. And the more mindful we are, the more time we spend looking at the natural world through this lens of absolute awe and wonder, reverence, the more connected we are, the more meaningful it is, the things that we choose to put in our mouths and where we choose to spend our time. And it is my hope for those of you that don't have gardens, this might inspire you to plant something, even if it's just a little pot with some herbs in it. So let me take you into my garden. And Gia, if anything kind of cuts out or goes a bit wonky, I trust that you'll let me know. So thank you, darling. All right. So this is my garden. Welcome to my garden. It is a wide variety of fruit trees. So this is a pear, and we get a lot of fruit on this. Here's some of the beautiful flowers that will eventually become fruit for us. The smell out here, by the way, is quite heavenly. When I take you out the front, oh my goodness, I wish we had smell cam. This is an almond. That we put around rather than having great big nets. There's a couple of reasons the garden doesn't look so pretty when we've got great big nets over everything, but it's also a bit precarious for the birds. The birds often get caught in them. So we bought a heap of these little individual bags that we use to cover the fruit. Some gets left for the birds, obviously. This is an apricot. We've got little tiny babies. Oh my gosh. These little tiny baby apricots are all starting to come out. So you can see as the flowers start to dry, this is what then becomes the fruit. Here, it was quite an audacious decision to have a crack at putting a fig in. For anyone that knows about figs, they're a giant tree. Look at the size of these beautiful leaves. Oh my gosh. They are like a centerpiece. You can just take these off and put them in vases inside and they're divine. But we've got, this is, well, I toss up between figs and quinces as my absolute favorite fruit. So we've got quite a lot of little bubby figs coming in. So as you can see, this hedge is really created. It almost feels like a secret garden in here. We're tucked in, which is lovely. And then we've got our peach tree. Look at the little baby peaches. I just want to wrap them all in little blankets. The mummy in me comes out and I just want to sing to them and nurture them and love them and pat them. They're all soft. They're so beautiful. And then this is an apple. So we've got two apples. One is a green apple and one's a red apple. So this is a green. Super pretty. Look at these blossoms. Oh my goodness. There seriously is nothing more beautiful. Fruit tree blossoms are the prettiest. And then this is our other apple. Just coming in now, little bobbies. I just realised I'm wearing a matching jumper. It's a pink theme today. So this is a quince. For anybody that doesn't know quince, it is honestly, you've got to bake them, but I'm sure a lot of people know quince paste, but baked quince is just something too divine. So lots of beautiful fruit. I wish we still had some blossom on it. The blossom are just about finished, but quince blossom, there is something about the colour of this pale and dark, the shape of the leaves. It is quite possibly the prettiest of all fruit trees. It is divine. As you can see, the espalier on this has gone a little out of control. And we've got a poor old nashi tree that's tucked away in the corner here that's never done very well. I'm not sure quite why. We did have a big tree. We took a tree out here that was creating a bit too much shade in the hope that it would come to life. But our poor nashi is, it's really, I mean, it's having a crack at coming back to life, but I don't know if it will. And then we've got some berries down here. So we've got we did have a massive passion fruit that absolutely covered this whole area. That was magnificent. It was absolutely magnificent. But they only last for 7 years. So that finished and we've put in a grape, which should be pretty. When, particularly, I mean, the fruit's gorgeous, but when the leaves all go that lovely orange red, it's magic. We've got silver beet and rainbow chard happening in here. So this is all just kind of, Laurie and I did a little bit of work in here over the weekend. We just put a variety of different lettuces in. We've got strawberries. If you can see, we've got some strawberries, some fruit coming to life there. What we do have that is absolutely divine is kiwi fruit. I'll show you the other one in a minute. So you've got to have male and female kiwi fruit to actually have fruit that works. But, oh, hang low. Mr. Pokey's getting some bit of sun. But this is just divine. Just divine. I don't know if it does it justice on camera, but the colour, the shape of the leaves, it is just the prettiest thing. I don't know if that's going to go all the way over and meet the hedge. We might get this lovely canopy that just comes overhead. And as you will see, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but we've got kiwi fruit, little Barbie kiwi fruit. Why my voice changes when I talk like that remains to be seen. Now let me just see. So let me take you through the house. I'll take you out the front. So out the front is the citrus garden, and I can't help but show you So beautiful. So beautiful. I've always got, these are the ones that I got on Saturday. They're not open yet. I've always got fresh flowers in the house. This is a hellebore that I have to keep in a little pot here. It's nearly finished, but for the gardeners, hellebores are absolutely a favorite. All right, I'll take you out the front and I'll turn the camera around again. So tiny little garden, but this is a mandarin. And we've never had much success we've never had a lot of success. I've never eaten anything off this, but it is absolutely covered in flowers at the moment. And citrus fruit, citrus flowers, the smell is heavenly. So I mentioned before that we had a flower farm, and what I used to grow, I had about 100 roses in my private garden, which I used for weddings and hotels and things that I did. But we had paddocks full of leucadendrons and proteas, which are not native. Everybody calls them native. They're South African. So we've got those. Over the side, we've got a grapefruit. Every year, probably 2 or 3. Nobody else eats them. One of my girls eats them, and I do. So this is a lemon. We've got a few on here. I've been picking them fairly consistently, so there's not a lot left, but we've got some there. This is a Banksia rose that's divine, and of course orange. Heavenly. I pick, as I walk past in the morning, I often pick one to have for my breakfast. And once again, we've got some soot on there, but beautiful. This is the Banksia rose. The flowers don't last very long, but oh my gosh, it's pretty. I love these big sort of waving strands that come out. It just creates this magical space. And of course, last of all is the lime. So that's our little front garden. You can see how tiny it is, but that's another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fruit trees that we have in there. So that gives you a picture of my garden. Now I'm going to turn this camera off because as I walk in the front, the sound goes weird. So I'll see you again in a second. We need sound. We need sound. So did that work? It's hard to see on my phone because it just I can only see the little picture of me or what's on my camera, but hopefully that worked for everybody. So Kylie will be with us shortly, but I just wanted to take you back. Yesterday I talked about using reverence, awe, and wonder as just little set points to help us reconnect to the natural world. The more meaning we can create in everything we do. Tomorrow I was actually thinking this morning that I might take you through my skincare and makeup and stuff that I use, because it's not just the products, the careful selection of the products that I use that are all natural, all organic wherever possible. But, you know, with my garden, when I take time to really look and not just see the weeds that need to be pulled out and the things that aren't done yet and the things that are messy and not perfect, because there's all of that. It's not about perfection. It is just that looking at the babies as they're born. Of course, we're not going to look at them the same way as we look at a human baby or a newborn puppy, but it is still having just that delight and reverence and wonder at Mother Nature, this effortless explosion of life that happens in spring when we look at these naked trees that suddenly the little buds start forming, and then we've got leaves, and then we've got flowers, and some flower before they leaf, and some leaf before they flower. And it's just like, why did Mother Nature design them this way? What is the purpose? There's always a purpose. Nothing in nature is purposeless. Nothing in nature is purposeless. The only thing I'm yet to work out what the purpose of is mosquitoes. I know flies have a purpose. It's kind of gross, but I don't know what the purpose of mosquitoes is. But as long as we can look at the natural world with this sense of absolute awe at how does a sunrise happen? How does a sunset happen? We have a sense, but what are the different clouds? And when we look at the fruit and the vegetables that we get to pick and eat, and for those that eat animals, but it is that cutting open an apple and looking at the fiber and the crispness and the color and just this effortless explosion of life and nutrition and vitality. And as long as we are connecting with this deep meaning, with reverence, with wonder, wonder is the exploration of how does this happen? Because, we take it so much for granted. It's so easy to take for granted what we have in abundance. It's so easy to take for granted having fresh air to breathe until you suddenly don't. It's so easy to take for granted having access to beautiful trees until you don't. You only have to travel, if you're used to being in open spaces in the country or in a really great suburban area, you only have to go into a really densely populated part of a city to notice the difference in our energy. It's really hard to maintain high levels of energy in densely populated areas with no access to nature. I'm wondering if you can think of that for yourself. The energy in your body rises as you walk onto a beach or into the ocean. And there are actually those of us whose systems, for whatever reason, are tuned to activate more acutely in the country than we do on the beach. And that's actually me. Whereas a lot of people, my husband included, absolutely comes to life on the beach and in the ocean. But it is that energy that exists when you are in nature that absolutely is pivotal to our ability to thrive and be well. It affects how our hormones work. I'll be talking to Kylie about that in a minute. But it affects, the circadian rhythms in our bodies, the melanin that allows us to rest and sleep, the cortisol that wakes us up in the morning. Yes, too much cortisol is not good, but we need cortisol to get us up and give us energy to start the day. All these different hormones in our bodies are working with the cycles of nature, moon cycles, for those that cycle, their periods with the moon. The more in tune with nature we are, the more our bodies thrive and flourish. The more our innate, intelligent immune systems can work to support us to thrive and flourish and have vitality and recover from illness. It's not about avoiding illness at all costs. Illness plays a role. We used to say when I was studying naturopathy, people that never ever get sick actually lack the vitality. What we want to do is, once a year we have these sort of purging colds or flus or things that come up that are actually a way of detoxing our bodies. It's not a terrible thing. We've been taught, it's this, I touched a little bit on this yesterday. We've been taught to fear so much. My apologies. We've been taught to fear so much, and illness is one of them. If we have this connection to ourselves and how to look after our health in step with nature, in step with the natural world, we don't need to fear these illnesses. Our bodies want nothing more than to keep us healthy and vital and well and alive. Our bodies are fighting and working with us every day to do this. And the more that we can be in step with the natural world, as much as possible, eating foods that are locally grown and in season and organic, these are all the steps that are part of supporting us to heal and thrive, which is the perfect time to introduce you to my very, very dear friend, Kylie. Kylie Pinwill is with us. Kylie, hello, darling. Hello, hello. I'm just going to put it, there we go, change my speaker view. I've just done a little tour of my garden.
Beautiful.
Kylie, oh, your sound just cut out. Are you okay? Are you with us?
Look.
Oh, yes, I think I can hear you. I can. So Kylie, for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting Kylie until now, Kylie is the founder of the Hormone Hub, naturopath, and all-around hormone wellness specialist. I'll get the words in the right order eventually. So Kylie, what I wanted to do today, if it works for you, is to talk about how we work with the natural world to support our health. And of course, I want to talk about food, one of my favorite subjects, and how that works with hormones as well. But I feel it's always a great idea to start with a little background into who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you do now.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Kylie Pinwill. I live on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and we are surrounded by beautiful produce, which is lovely. But how I sort of got into, I guess, nutrition and food initially was as a young kid. So I grew up in Sydney, and, I was surrounded by, in a very Australian family. So I remember going to my grandma's house in, the late 70s, and it was a barbecue, and she was cooking ham steaks and tinned ring pineapple on the barbecue. It was very exotic.
I could almost taste it.
It was like the ham steaks were like that thick. And God knows what it actually was.
I know.
It was, but like that was our family barbecue. And if we had Chinese, that was fancy.
Yeah.
And living in Sydney, I had all these like friends, like big melting pot of cultures. And I had a Lebanese friend, and I would go round to her house, and her, there'd be these army of women in the kitchen just cooking all this amazing stuff. And, I'd be like, oh, and I was just really fascinating because it was food that I'd never seen before, and I loved it. Then I had an Italian friend who, Nonna was in the kitchen and Nonna was making cannoli, and I was like, this is the real deal. And then I had a Greek friend, and then I had, so all of these friends, this big melting pot of cultures. And then what I realized was, because I'd go back to my, Greek friend's house, I was like, and I was a bit cheeky, I was like, could we have those things that we had last time that were really delicious? And then, Zia, would be in the kitchen. Zia Maria would be in the kitchen. She's like, no, we only have those at Orthodox Easter. And I'm like, oh, so we just can't have that now? And, and then, and it just sort of gave me this realization that in so many cultures, and for my family barbecues we had our ham and pineapple steaks, but for so many cultures, just the ritual of food and how food connects us as people, and connects us to where we are at in the season and the celebration and the celebration of what's going on in the moment, and just that cultural aspect of food. Like, I was absolutely fascinated with it. And I think that's what sort of triggered my love for food, and just having that natural curiosity about, what is that food, and how can we eat it, and why do you eat it, and, when in the seasons do you eat it? So I was very lucky to be exposed to that kind of organically at a really young age. And that's where I, absolutely soak up the SBS food shows and the cooking shows. And because I love it, when they just find these, ingredients that are local to that area or special to that area. And that's a really, big thing. And it's something I'm really passionate about. And, my dream is I'm going to throw this out to the universe, is to run like food tours, go to Morocco and go to Sri Lanka and go to Vietnam and go, like all of these places. Yeah. And of course, France and Italy, because, who doesn't love a croissant and a cafe au lait? But, to go and experience that, I think, amazing.
I had a similar experience and had a lot of Asian friends, and remember, because I went to boarding school, a very international school. And so we would, their families would come over and we would go out to eat in different, and there's a big, sort of Chinatown and so on in Melbourne near where I live. And I remember, like the different food, and it's like, like chicken's feet and like things, but they just have these rituals, and there is, like that reverence for the animal, in that they eat everything, nothing is wasted, because they've come from these cultures where they didn't have the luxury of throwing food away. Everything gets used. And I learned a lot from that as well. And I think this is one of the things that in Australia we haven't necessarily learned, is this reverence food, and the rituals that go with having, multiple generations eating together. And we eat these foods at Easter and these foods at Christmas, and then there's the seasonal. I think that's a really missing part.
It's Nonna's specialty, and this particular dish is Auntie Jane's specialty, and this particular dish is, so that just fascinated me. And and I think you're right, just that whole, because I lived in Sweden for a year when I finished high school, and I lived on a farm. So I've gone from Sydney and I've gone to a pig farm in the middle of Sweden. And, and again, it was very much, like it was hunting season. So, and the window for hunting was quite small. And the rules around, what you could do and what you could take and what you could access in that time. So you couldn't get the calves, you couldn't get the mothers, but you could get, the bulls and, things like that. And again, and at first I was like, I'm not really down with this. But then, but the respect that the hunters had for making sure that they picked certain, animals for a certain purpose. Like it wasn't just going and pillaging everything. And I think, like years later, we traveled around Australia with our kids, and so I signed up for every single Indigenous cultural thing that we could do, and my kids would be like, oh, another one. And I'd be like, but they got something out of it every single time. And the food, and again, because I'm sort of drawn to the food, but what I loved was, they only take what they need. Certain things come in certain seasons, and there was no, well, just because it's there, we don't need to take all of it. They were very respectful of the cycles, and we take what we need, and this is special in this season, that's special in that season. And if we take too much of that animal won't be able to feed, and then there'll be less of that, and, it creates problems. So just so interesting. And so that sort of got me sort of down that whole rabbit hole of food as medicine as well. Just learning about, and I think when we look at fresh herbs and, what foods, I mean, chicken soup when we're sick, and when you sort of look at it from a nutrition point of view, it's a very traditional sort of I guess, Western culture thing. We do chicken soup, but there's actually a lot of, reason behind why chicken soup came to be. So, and broths and things like that. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think there is this always this desire to make things faster, quicker, more convenient. But in that great grab for faster, quicker, more convenient, we've lost a lot of these really amazing skills, the time to get in the kitchen and make a chicken soup. I mean, my kids all still talk about the chicken soups that we used to eat, and it's like, I've got 3 that don't live at home anymore, and every now and then it's like, I really could do with a chicken soup, Mum.
yeah.
But there's no comparison with a handful of pharmaceuticals to try and squash down the symptoms, compared to being tucked into bed and a bowl of chicken soup, and the effect on our system is radically different.
Yeah, huge. And I always sort of say it to my clients is, you can't, so I work specifically now with women going through perimenopause and menopause. And, I'm a big believer, some women need HRT. So it's not like that's, and there's lots of forms available now that are in a bioidentical form. It's, much lower dose, is very low risk, and I'm, very respectful of people choosing. All of us can choose. It doesn't have to be either or.
Yeah.
But my caveat to that, and this is for any medication, is you need to have those foundations in place.
Yes.
So you need to have, good nutrition. You need to have, those mindful practices. You need to have that stress management practice, because if you do, you're just sort of putting a Band-Aid over the top. Yeah. It's like, allergies. We can take an antihistamine, it will bring our symptoms down. But if we work on getting our body to, say, clear the histamines more effectively, we're going to be much better off in the long run. Yeah. So there's so much we can do from a food perspective. And our bodies are meant to eat real food. Our body knows what to do with real food. So it knows what to do with the beautiful fats that come naturally in nuts. It knows what to do with, the fats from an avocado. And, when we go down the calorie track, you can have an avocado, which is going to give you fiber, healthy fats, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, antioxidants, all of that goodness. For the same calories, you can have a bag of chips, and that's going to give you nothing, apart from maybe a headache because of the MSG and the flavoring, another couple of lumps on your bum. So it's, when a client comes in and she's like, oh yeah, I've been using MyFitnessPal for years. Yeah. It's like, okay, and just undoing that conditioning that it's about calories, or conditioning that it's about convenience. Because, the way we nourish our body really is the most basic form of self-care. So what we put into our bodies on a daily basis, and it's not about being perfect. It's about sort of how do we be consistent? Yes. So then that way, if you do have the odd meal, and it also, when you're consistent with choosing sort of food that works for your body, you're actually less likely to choose food that doesn't, because and how it makes you feel. So choose into what foods make you feel energized, what, gives you lots of energy, makes you feel good, it nourishes and energizes your inner being, I think, versus foods that make you feel heavy and sluggish and bloated. Because, we can feel, and learn so much about what food works for us by tuning into, well, how did that feel in my body? Didn't feel that great. Yeah. And then being able to make a choice and going, you know what, we're going to grandma's house. She's going to cook that steak, that ham steak and that pineapple. I want to connect with her. I'm just going to eat the ham and steak and let it go. My grandma's long gone with her ham and steak, ham steaks. Love you, Grandma.
There's something, my grandmother, who died many years ago now, but her thing was violet crumbles.
Yes, yeah.
They still make violet crumbles.
Yeah, I don't know. But we had, same grandma, we had a lolly jar at her house, and we were allowed to go, and we were allowed to, and this is the thing, we were allowed to take 2 lollies from the lolly jar.
Yeah.
So we would always go for the violet crumble, the little cubes, because that was the biggest one. And then we might take a Smartie. And then that was it. But we felt like we had a treat without, we weren't eating the whole bag. We weren't allowed free range in that lolly jar either. So it was, I think, taught, I guess the lesson there was, that being mindful of that one little cube of violet crumble that we had, and, you would savor it. And
Yeah, absolutely. Rather than, a whole thing of favorites and you just kind of plow your way through. I very freely admit that my willpower can be pretty ordinary. So I just simply don't have things in the house. That's how I set myself up. So, because I work from home, so that makes it easier. And so the majority of my time is spent here. So the only food that I have access to in my home is stuff that I know is going to really support my health. And that's just setting myself up to win.
Yeah. And that's what I say to clients all the time. Like if you don't want to eat it, if it's not in your trolley, it's not going to be in your house. And your kids don't need it, your husband doesn't need it, your partner doesn't need it. So, because I get a lot of push, but the kids. And it's like, well, why don't you, turn it around? And then it's okay to have that stuff every now and then. And the box of favourites. Like I've got 3 teenage children. They can demolish that box quicker than, I go, is there any cherry ripe left? So gone.
I don't know if I want to tell this story. My son came out this morning. He's working at the moment, and I said to him last night, we haven't got stuff for your lunch tomorrow. Like, what are we gonna, he knows that I'll get up and make him a lunch if he doesn't do it himself. And he came out this morning, half asleep, and he was like, do you still have a thermos, Mum? And I was like, yeah. I said, why do you? And he said, oh, I've got 2-minute noodles. I nearly had a heart attack. I was like, oh my gosh, honey.
Not food.
Not food.
I know. And I think with my kids, because 3 teenage kids, and again, one's working, and I've kind of, they all know how to cook eggs, 100 different ways. They all can make a stir fry. They can all, do things, but, they essentially are lazy. And I often hear, there's no food in the house. And it's like, we've got lots of food. And then we've got lots of ingredients. We just don't have food. Like, food takes a bit, you can make yourself some eggs with mushroom, spinach and tomato in like 3 minutes. And they, for the most part, they're pretty good. We do have, and I've always had this thing, you need to have something green on your plate. Yeah. And the other morning I was walking past and there was a very brown plate of eggs and I think bacon and toast sort of going on. I was like, where's your greens? Yeah. So with that, and I've always got a big container of spinach. So he's leant over, he's picked up one thing of spinach and just dropped it on his plate and went, green. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. But I hope that, like they've grown up with real food and they've grown up knowing what a proper meal looks like. So when they do leave home, they know. So, I use a plate planning sort of system with all of my clients, and it's just, it's very visual, and it's just getting, how do we get those vegetables, fill your plate with veggies? How do we get the right amount of protein, carbs, and healthy fats? And I don't get my clients to weigh food. I don't get them to measure it out in cups, but I sort of train them to use that visual of what should be on your plate, because then it just becomes second nature. To sort of do it, rather than, oh, well, I need to get out the kitchen scales and I need to weigh my protein and I need to, measure my carbs in a cup and things like that. And I think that serves a purpose initially, just to sort of get in the swing of it. But you really just want to, I'm not actually that hungry tonight, I'm going to eat a little bit less. Yep. Or I'm starving, so, or it's a couple of days leading into my period, I'm a bit hungrier, I need more food. Yeah. So it's just sort of tuning into your body and how you feel. Or you've done a big, you've exercised and you pushed yourself and you're hungry. then you need more food. You know, we sort of have this eat less, eat less, eat less, you know, whereas sometimes we actually need to be eating more as well.
Yeah. One thing that I'm very aware of as well is that, you know, in our culture, we've become trained to eat our biggest meal at the end of the day, which is actually when we need the least energy. So doing a bit of a flip, depending on when you have your first meal of the day, eat the biggest meal to start, and then it slowly gets smaller, not the other way around.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting, you know, with fasting. So we all know that intermittent fasting is it's a big thing. There's lots of, you know, God love Michael Mosley. You know, if only I had his marketing team behind me is all I can say there.
Yeah.
His what's the word? This is my perimenopause as I lose my words. His
I love it. Yeah.
his content's not that, you know, applicable for women is what I will say.
Yeah.
So with women, we naturally have a higher cortisol sort of spike in the morning.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's natural. So, you know, we tend to need that to get us up, get us out. And that's what gets us up, gets us out of bed and gets us going for the day. So we have that high cortisol. It sort of, you know, dips during the day, and then melatonin kicks in at night, you know, to put us off to sleep. So with women, particularly if you're already, you know, under a certain amount of chronic stress, and I think, you know, so many of us are, you know, just from the load that we carry, you know, all day. So, you know, our cortisol spikes in the morning. We might, you know, just have a coffee because, you know, we're fasting. So we'll have a coffee, you know, that's going to spike our cortisol, spike our insulin, and they're our two sort of biggest fat storage hormones. So they're our hormones that go, oh, and cortisol sort of goes, oh, I don't know when she's going to feed us again. So we'll just whack that on around her middle again.
Yeah.
So fasting, particularly for women, and skipping breakfast can actually go against us. So this is where a lot of women sort of say, oh, you know, it worked for the first couple of weeks, and then it didn't. And, you know, and that's the reason why, is because your body, your cortisol levels are already high. Your body sort of goes, well, we don't know when she's going to feed us. So we're just going to start stockpiling everything that she feeds us, and we're just going to dump it around the middle, around the back, on that back fat, here, you know, all of the fun places, which is, you know, hard to kind of shift that as well. Yeah. So when we sort of flip that whole fasting thing around, if we start our day with a decent breakfast, our cortisol is high, a good breakfast with, you know, protein, healthy fats, you know, carbohydrates, and, you know, some fiber, that's going to anchor our blood sugar. So, which is going to anchor that insulin response and anchor that cortisol down. So then, instead of having that spike from the coffee and then that crash a couple of hours later, where then we're looking for another coffee and a muffin or a bicky or something like that, and then we're going up and down all day, we're anchored our blood sugar and our cortisol right from the beginning. So then during the day, like, we still get a blood sugar response and an insulin response, but it comes down much slower. So then if we, as women, are going to fast, you know, we should be actually having dinner earlier. I live in Queensland. Everyone has dinner here at 6 o'clock. It's hilarious. You know, coming from, like, you know, 7, 8, 9 o'clock dinners, but but it also sort of makes sense because you're eating earlier, and then you've got, you know, your cortisol's at its lowest, melatonin kicks in, and you get a good night's sleep. So for all of the breakfast skippers out there, you know, first up, always eat breakfast before you have coffee. And I'm a coffee lover, so I'm not going to say no coffee, but breakfast before coffee. And if you are going to fast, have a decent breakfast and, you know, bring your dinner earlier.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I've been not eating in the morning for a long time, but just don't get hungry until 11 or 12. And so I'm gonna give this a crack. And
that's the thing. We train ourselves to not eat. But we can also train ourselves to eat. But I also see in a lot of women is, who are low in energy, who are fasting and missing breakfast. And it's sort of like, okay, well, we wouldn't jump in the car. If I was going to drive Queensland and come down and see you, in Victoria, I wouldn't say, yeah, should we do that? Let's do that. But I wouldn't jump in the car and say, you know what, no petrol until Sydney. Because my car wouldn't go. But yet we expect ourselves to run through the day on no fuel and still do all the things that we need to do and wonder why we're tired. So this is, and everyone is different and everyone has a different response. But for the ladies who are tired, the ladies who are sort of feeling a bit under the pump, highly encourage, breakfast first. To give you the fuel to get through the day.
There's so many different people that are experts talking about different things. It can be, it's a lot. And, I've got a lot of training in this area and still I'm grappling with what makes sense and what doesn't. What you're talking about makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because I was talking to a girlfriend of mine who's an Ayurvedic practitioner yesterday. I had an appalling day yesterday. It was just one of those days. And I had been reading The Medical Medium, another one. And he was another one. So, right. So the last 2 days over the weekend, I decided, I'll give this, I've been hearing all about this celery juice. I'll give this celery juice a crack. Oh, I'm hardcore. I love my Chinese herbs. I don't mind bitters. I can. The celery juice, there was something that happened in my body that was like, this is not a good idea.
And again, imagine if we had that marketing machine, like the content is terrible. So this guy, and I don't want to
different for different people.
It's different for different people. So I'm very much coming at it with a female lens. So women who are going through perimenopause, who are menopausal, postmenopausal, like that is the lens I'm looking at. And, something like the medical medium, like to take that one thing and put it against everyone, and say, this is what everyone should do. That's something I really disagree with because there's no research or any substance behind what that guy is promoting, and just be very clear on that. He's got a marketing machine behind him and, he's taken it and run. And, like for anyone with, I don't know, thyroid conditions, hormonal stuff going on, like it's just the worst.
That's so interesting, isn't
it? Yeah.
So interesting.
And it's also important to recognize that a lot of the research on any of that, so the medical medium, there is zero research behind that. But, we can all say Michael Mosley's research and, the research that's been done on fasting, the research that's been done, say, on ketogenic diets and things like that, is they don't do this research on women. They do it on men because men have a very even hormonal profile. So they're easier to monitor in a cohort, whereas women are up and down and up and down, and it's too hard. They don't even do research on female rats for a lot of things for the same reason. So all of this is done on men and then extrapolated out for the whole population, which is just so wrong. It is slowly changing, but even a lot of like pharmaceutical drugs, the research and all the data and all the trials are done on men. And then what they're finding with a lot of with what's happening is women have very different side effects and very different reactions to different pharmaceuticals that they never saw when they were putting the research and doing the trials because there were no women involved. So they're starting to realize that now, and it is sort of slowly shifting, but I don't think fast enough.
So interesting.
We've gotten so far off track from food.
And I was having a conversation with one of my daughters yesterday who has been having terrible heart palpitations and trying to get to the bottom of what is causing that. And her doctor just put her, she went to see, you know, it was just somebody that she saw randomly, not somebody she'd seen before, but just stood her on the scales and said, your weight's good, you're young, you should be fine. It'll, you know, it hasn't got anything to do with what you're eating. It's amazing that there is such a disconnect
yeah. So my brain's gone straight to how's her blood sugar, how's her electrolyte imbalance, you know, electrolytes, that can be a big thing, her kidney function, you know, like what would cause heart palpitations potentially, you know. And it's and you know, if she is a healthy weight, why make her get on the scale? Like, seriously.
She said exactly the same thing. She said, just look at me and say,
I know. That's like, oh, what century is he from?
Well, you know, I'll share with you because I think it's interesting because, I mean, she lives very, very remotely, as in 5 hours from the supermarket kind of. And they'll often be feeling tired when they've got to drive back from doing a run and will get a Red Bull. And she said, I worked it out, Mum.
That would do it. Yeah, so that high caffeine, high sugar, the colorings, the chemicals in that. Whereas if she had like a hydrolyte instead, you know, just to get that, because it's hot and it's, you know, she's sweating a lot. So just to get that, I'd be starting there.
Yeah, having pieces of fruit to grab and eat.
Yeah. And I know, you know, from when we traveled around Australia, the availability of produce is tough out there.
And expensive, very expensive.
Yeah, hugely. We had this, when we were traveling, this sort of like order of food. So we would have to buy for the 5 of us. And luckily the kids were little. I don't know how we would do it with teenagers and the amount they eat now, but we would have this like order of fruit and vegetables. So we'd stock up for, you know, a good 3 weeks. So we would have, and what we would eat first is all the fresh salad and things. So we'd rocket spinach, tomatoes, cucumbers, like all of those things we would eat first. Then we would go into the next sort of, so, you know, red cabbage or purple cabbage, wombok, shallots, onions, you know, so sort of a bit more heartier sort of salads. And then we would go into potatoes, sweet potatoes, oranges, you know, so we just had this level of foods that we're eating, and we knew that, you know, after a few days of like potatoes and sweet potatoes and, you know, oranges was our fruit because they lasted longer. And it was just hilarious because we knew by the time we got on the potato diet that we needed to hit a new town. But it was good. But we always had some form of fresh produce on board. And then we were with people who would be, or camping with people who would open up a packet of hot dogs and boil that in. And I'm like, and even my kids are like, what are they eating? You know, my kids they'd never seen a hot dog. They're like, what are they eating? And I was like, I don't know. You just eat your, you know, cabbage salad with your tin tuna, you'll be fine. And they're munching away.
I think it's worth touching on the cost of food again, because it is a very relevant conversation. But my thoughts, and having been as broke can be as a single mum with 4 kids, we ate all organic food all the time, and it meant that our clothes came from op shops, and I drove a very inexpensive car, and it becomes a values conversation. And when we apply this level of love and reverence and awe to food and the power, the role that it plays in our lives, suddenly the value that we place on having the nicest car and the nicest house and the nicest clothes and all these other things, the value, we can tip the scales on the value. And it's about really being connected to the incredible power of food.
And that's it. So we've got, I don't know, and I guess they're non-negotiables for us. And it's you know, is good quality food. And I ran a retreat up in Noosa on the weekend, and someone asked she was a single woman. She lived alone. She had a really busy job. So for her, it wasn't the dollar amount, it was the time. And, you know, and the way we sort of like looked at it is, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. but it does, like, if you sort of, you know, prioritize, and I sort of love this framing, you know, what's the words? You know, oh, I don't have time to cook dinner tonight.
Yeah.
And if you reframe that, like, I'm choosing not to make eating a decent dinner a priority tonight. And you know what? Sometimes that's okay. And then other times, like, oh, I'm choosing to not prioritize feeding myself well this week. It's sort of like, okay, so what am I prioritizing instead? So yeah, so and I always sort of say to people, you know, do what you can with what's available to you. You know, we all live in different areas. We all have different things available. And what season of life are you in as well? So, you know, if going to Coles and Woolies and buying a bag of pre-chopped up stir-fried veggies, like, if that, because you're short on time, you're short on money, you know, that is better than choosing a pizza.
Yeah.
You know, so if you can, you know, maybe the next week go, oh, actually, it doesn't take me that long to chop up all of that stuff, so I'm going to go for the whole version. Yeah. So if we sort of think, the more that's done to our food, it loses just that little glow. So if we have a beautiful veggie garden and we're pulling our veggies and our produce from our own garden, like, that is amazing. It's been grown with love. You've put all the good things in there, and, you know, like, that is, you know, it doesn't get much fresher and much better than that. But, you know, and then at the other end, we've got, you know, choosing a pizza. So, you know, somewhere in between there with what you can do, you know, if you can make it to your local farmers market, and I always encourage people, get to know your local providers. You know, like, if you've got a fruit and veggie guy down the road, get to know them. And, you know, because generally, most of the time, they're passionate about the food. So, you know, and learn what's in season, what's not, what's, you know, how far is it grown, you know, where did it come from? I know our fruit and veggie guy is really good, and he'll really promote that whole local thing, and you can taste the difference. You know, you really can, like, local tomatoes, local strawberries, local this, local that. Oh, we can't get broccoli or whatever it is here because they can't grow it because it goes moldy, so it gets grown somewhere. So that's why we ship that in. And then when you go, oh, okay, right, I can deal with that. You know, there's a reason why that travels. You know, versus, and I would do that versus going to the supermarket where, you know, everything is available all the time. But you know what, sometimes I just need to go to the supermarket and get what I can from the supermarket. So I think if you can do it in a way that it all sort of balances out. You know, I would love to get, you know, there's a local organic delivery up here, and it's all local, it's all organic, it's beautiful. My kids would smash that, you know, $100 box in like 30 seconds. So it's just not in our means. But, you know, I can see down the track, like, just before we had kids, we used to do that. And then I can see in my life after I have children who leave home, you know, that will come back to us. But at the moment, you know, we have a beautiful butcher. So, you know, and I know I can, and it's all local meats. We don't get a lot of pork because, no, is it pork? We don't get a lot of lamb here because, or, you know, local lamb, because, you know, it's Queensland. It's very hot for the poor little sheep. So they don't live here. They don't, you know, they're not grazing, but I can drive 20 minutes and I can see the cows having a very happy life in the paddock. And they're beautiful and fat and delicious. Sorry to all the vegans watching. But I know that, you know, that meat that I buy from my butcher, you know, that those animals have been raised ethically and they've had a good life, and, you know, you know, so I think the ethical side of food comes into it as well, you know, knowing that, you know, it wasn't, and I think a lot of people get caught up on, say, documentaries that are based in the US. So a lot of their farming practices are very different to our farming practices. So they tend to have a lot more, you know, feedlots, and you know, it does happen here, but not to the same extent. So a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm not eating meat, it's all, it's sort of like, okay, well, where did that information come from? So it's a bit like your medical mediums and your Michael Mosleys, like, where does that information come from?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is US sort of driven, on their farming, on the worst of their farming product things. So I think, you need to sort of bring it into context of what we can do here. And the same as fishing, if like wild caught barramundi versus farmed barramundi, you can taste the difference. Wild caught barramundi lives in salt water. It's, whereas farmed barramundi is grown in like muddy rivers and it tastes like mud.
And what they feed them as well is
the whole salmon thing. It's like, well,
Yeah. I think, the whole purpose of this series is reconnection. And the more we can reconnect to our food, where it comes from, the different experience of going to the farmer's market and selecting the onions carefully from the little wooden bins that you're talking to the farmer while you do it. You don't want to waste it.
No.
There's this lovely connection. You can chat away to the person that grew the food, and it just brings meaning back to food. And I think the more we can bring that connection and meaning back to the privilege of the food that we get to eat in this country, just out of this world. We're so lucky.
Absolutely. So I think just let go of the judgment of it always having to be perfect. It's sort of like, make the best choices available to you at the time. And then, but just always sort of like lift the bar for yourself and kind of go, you know what, I want to try that. Is that in season? Like, why are we eating mangoes in July? That's not a thing. Where did the mangoes come from? I'm going to put that back and I'm going to choose something that does come, in season. Where was it grown? Where did it come from? And just, get curious about, shifting into fresh produce, seasonal produce, locally grown produce, because the less traveled your food, the more nutritious it's going to be for you.
And there's always a way. This is the beauty of online World Wide Web, is as women we get to lock arms. We've a lot of us have worked out workarounds. If you want to know fast ways to put together a meal, there's lots of us that have worked it out along the way, so we get to share, swap stories, and
absolutely. One of like the regular dinners on rotation for us is big tray, and I just chop up 600 different veggies and throw it in there. So it'll be, I'll have cauliflower, I'll have Asian greens, I'll have mushrooms, capsicum, zucchini, sweet potato, Spanish onion, like I'll have all of these big mixes. I sort of drizzle it in olive oil, bit of salt, bit of pepper, and I put that in the oven. It literally just took me 5 minutes to chop all that stuff up, put it in the oven. Then I go off and I do the pickups, the drop-offs, my unpaid Uber driving job that I do on the side, drop off, pick up, and I run around, and then I come back and then those veggies are nearly ready. So then I'll pull out our protein, so is it, whether it's chicken breasts or, beautiful pork fillets or steak or, whatever we're having, and I'll either stir fry it or I'll do it on the barbecue or I'll put it in the oven. So I'm not doing a whole lot, but I'm just sort of, literally just turning on the barbecue, heating that up, and then barbecuing whatever it is. Then I might throw together just like because I've always got a container of leafy greens. So I'll just throw a container of, like a couple of handfuls of leafy greens, put all of those veggies onto a platter, put the protein on a platter, and everyone comes and helps themselves at the table. So it's a really easy dinner. We would probably have that. And I'm constantly mixing up the vegetables, the proteins. So it's always different. But it's just a way we prefer to eat. And even traveling around Australia, that's the way we ate. We would just literally do all of that in the barbecue. So
my go-to is a big heavy pot, like a cast iron pot with a lid, And
Yeah.
I do my veggies in a 3, so dark green leafies, deeply coloured. So when you cut through them, beetroot, carrot, capsicum, anything you think of, it's deeply coloured when you cut through it for the antioxidants. So dark green leafies, deeply coloured, and then I have sulfur rich, so onion, mushrooms. So something from those 3 families all goes in the pot, one great big pot, all that goes in, and then a meat, preferably something on the bone if I can get it, some fresh filtered water, tomato in the oven, and it cooks away all day. I mean,
I know. And the whole house smells like
it's so good. And for those of us in a slightly colder climate, that works.
Yeah, I'm sort of like, just turn these roast veggies into a salad.
Absolutely. So I think I don't know how we go. I've kept you for a while. It's been such a lovely conversation. Maybe if we just finish up, I'm dying to know, what's your favorite brekkie?
Oh gosh, I do change a lot, and I tend to like get on one thing and I keep going. At the moment, I'm loving, because it is a bit warm, so I'm making a big batch of chia pudding. So I use chia seeds. I like the cocoa quench.
Me too.
Pure Harvest. So I soak that. I also add cinnamon, cardamom, and just a little bit of cacao powder to that. So then I'll do that on the weekend. So that goes in the fridge in a container. Then on top of that, so I'll just take out a scoop of that, or add a scoop of sort of beautiful full fat yogurt. I'll chop up, because an abundance of berries at the moment, so I'll chop up strawberries, blueberries. I always like apple because I love the crunch. Then a handful of like a granola that I've made. So again, I make a big batch of granola, all nuts, seeds, buckwheat, little kernels, the activate, all of the yummy things. And I'll literally drizzle a little bit of maple syrup and then sort of stir fry that, quite quickly, and then put that in a container. So yeah, I put a couple of scoops of that on my chia pudding, and it's delicious and fills me up, keeps me going until lunchtime. So
now I'm hungry.
I know. Now I want second breakfast.
We didn't talk before we did this interview. If you had a little something for the women, you can tell me later if you want to, or if you've got something in mind.
Yeah, no, I've got a guide for hormone healthy foods, which I will email through to Edwina, and she can send it out for you.
Perfect. That is perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Is always such a delight. You can come at any time. Actually, I'm coming to your place for breakfast. I'll just get on a plane.
Yeah. No, do that. You're welcome. I've got a guest room. How much fun would that be?
Oh, we'll do that. I'm in my brain. I'm like, we can go to Italy together.
I know. The food tour is going to be like a whole. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'd be so up for that. So up for that.
I know, right?
All
right. Watch this space. Well,
watch this space.
Thank you so much for having me, Edwina, and thank you everyone for watching, and thank you to everyone watching the replay as well. So
absolutely. All right, beautiful women, that's it from us this morning.
Janet.
I'll be back with you tonight, and with Sydney Ford, which is going to be fabulous. All right, gorgeous women, have a fabulous day ahead.
Thank you so much. Bye everyone.